Hello, hello to the True Blue crew. Welcome to the merry month of May and our first Saturday live stream. Welcome, and I invite you to grab a cup of coffee, tea, beverage of your choice, and settle in for the next couple hours. If you have a stitching project, please let me know what you're working on. Say hello in the chat. I'm Andy, and this is True Blue Quilts, a place to enjoy, experiment, and excel as you quilt. So the project for today, as I've been doing on the first Saturday of each month, is introducing the next block in the Little Bit Different Block of the Month program. And of course, in May, we are blooming. We have this fun flower block. And for 2023, my Little Bit Different Block of the Month program is rectangles. So all of our blocks are going to finish at 6 inches by 9 inches. Well, when you have the block done, 6.5 by 9.5. But we are working on this flower block today. If you want to grab the pattern, hop over to truebluequilts.com. Everything spelled regular, no funky spellings there for truebluequilts.com. And you'll see a link to all of the block of the month patterns that are free in 2023. So we're working on tall flowers today, and I've got a variety of fabrics. I pre-cut everything. We're going to start with units that are 3.5 by 5 inches of your flower color, 3.5 by 5. And then we need some green background squares at 1.5 inches and some centers, whether you do a light color, a dark color, whatever other scraps you have for the center, we need 1.5 inch squares. So a 3.5 by 5 for your flower color and your 1.5 inch squares for the background colors and the center. So you can see how those all come together here to make our violet block. And I've done this block with square units too, and it's a lot of fun. I did a scrappy flower quilt for my daughter when she was little, and she helped me pick out different fabrics for the flowers. And it's just a fun, almost a snowball block, because you're just sewing these stitch and flip corners and putting the 4 blocks together. You do have to rotate your units to get that pinwheel effect going and make that flower petal come to life there. So when you're working with rectangles, it's a little bit of a challenge. You can see my corner squares are a little bit different. Theme of 2023. Hi, Jean. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm glad you found us this morning. Well, it's morning where I am. But you have to make sure you put your background corners on different places on the 2 halves of your flower, and I will explain that as we get going. So I start off with my squares. I'm going to take 1 stack of 4, and I'm just going to chain piece on the corners of my block. And Nan is here from Sweden again. It's so exciting to see international friends show up, and I love to see you, Nan. What are you working on today? Like I said, I'm just going to chain piece here for a second. It doesn't take too long to get those corners. And when I'm working with just a 1.5 inch, I'm sewing from corner to corner. I can eyeball that. If you want to take the time to mark your corners, do that. If you've got that 1/4 inch seam tape, you can put that on your machine as well. But I like to use just that center marking on my throat plate. The bobbin cover has a marking already. If I just aim for that with the corners of my little square, it makes that diagonal line no problem. And I like to chain piece these units, so I'm working with multiple blocks here, and I'll show you all my colors as we go along. I'm just placing my square in the top right corner for the first one. I managed to get all my scraps cut and organized this morning, so hopefully we'll be smooth sailing as we sew together. Now, Hike from Bath, North Carolina. You'll have to give me some pronunciation hints there. I hate to butcher people's names, but you tend to go phonetically when you're reading online. Oh, and Nan's working on a table runner for beginner class. Looking forward to that. It's always fun to introduce new people to our quilting world, quilting obsession. And Heike, thank you for that. Welcome. If I have my full name written out, I go by Andy, but my full name's Andrea, and people have pronounced that with some variations. Andrea, it sounds way too formal. Andrea, Andy. Okay, so I have my first corner. So here's another one of my fabrics. I just grabbed a kind of yellowish polka dot, yellow and pink, because I've got some pink flowers and some purple flowers, and we're just using up the stash on this project. So I've got my first quarter, and I'm going to do 2 with corners on the skinny end, and then the other 2 will have corners on the fat end. So I have to pay attention as I'm sewing if I'm going to sew the tops or the sides. So we'll do the top first. So I'm going to place that square in the opposite corner. Same thing. I am just sewing across that little square. So I've got 2 on the skinny side. And then we're going to do 2 on the long side. So 2 on the long side there. And Teresa is here from Florida. Teresa is asking about my machine. The machine that stays set up here at home in my sewing room is a Baby Lock Aria. And, my mom gave this to me because it was her second machine and she didn't use it very often. And with the computerized module, she was like, I really don't want it to sit for long periods. That may do funky stuff with the electronics. So she gave it to me. I use it a lot more often. I don't do very much of the fancy decorative stitching or embroidery stuff. It's set to a straight stitch because I'm just using it for piecing. And then I have a small gnome that I take to classes when I am, or retreats, or anytime I'm sewing out of the house. Nan is usually using orange. Yeah, I love, one of my favorite flowers ever since I was a little kid was a marigold, and those are generally an orange flower. So I thought about putting some oranges in, but I didn't dig into that bin. I just grabbed leftovers that I had out on the various surfaces. I'm very much a horizontal organizer. is my nice name for all the clutter in my sewing room. But yes, I'm going with pink and green and white are perfect for these springtime flowers. So let me get this last corner going. And since I started a little bit early to have some chain piecing going so that we didn't have quite so much dead air stitching sounds going on, I've got my other chain piecing blocks. Have to remember which pile of little squares goes with which so that we can get our leader enders going here. And you could be trimming off the excess corners as you go. I usually save that step and do it all at once when I've got the 3 pieces in place. So this one I'm working with a dark plum from, this is actually a Moda Grunge fabric. That's such a great basic. Good job, Moda. Okay, so I've got my 2 blocks. They're actually going to go like this. You've got your green squares at the top on 2 of the units, and you've got your green squares on the side. Now, as I said, when you work with squares, if you were doing this as a square block, it wouldn't matter. You could just put the green squares together and then rotate your square. But when you rotate a rectangle, it changes the dimension. So that's why we had to put the green squares on the side so that it looks like our petals are spinning around that center there. And of course, if you wanted to do a traditional snowball block with all 4 corners, you would just have more of a background area there. So Nan, I'm not following your chain sewing. Oh, you mean my little blade saver snipper? Yeah, this is a great thread snipper. I'm not in the habit yet of grabbing this to separate my units when I chain piece. So I just out of habit grab my scissors. But yeah, when I'm chain piecing, some people keep the chain together and continue sewing, and I just have never gotten in the habit of that either. I like to separate all my pieces and have individual units when I'm chain piecing with my machine. Okay, so we've got our green background squares. So now I'm going to put my centers on. And with this yellow flower, I auditioned some of my backgrounds or my center choices, light centers, and I decided to go with just a plain black. Now, with the centers, we do have to pay attention to which bottom corner I'm going. So I put my units together the way they're going to be in the flower, and then I can see which corner is the center. It's going to be the right corner on the skinny and the left corner on my other unit. So I want to make sure I have my block laid out correctly so that I don't have time with the seam ripper later. So I will keep those set up so I know which corner I am sewing. Lots of up and down with the presser foot. I saw a demo once where the instructor just fed everything through her machine without lifting the presser foot in between. And I always get my corners will get all jagged if I try it that way. So I just take that extra step of lifting the presser foot, especially with my 1/4 inch foot. That side metal guide gets in the way and snags the fabric. And so there's all these little movements that we do without thinking about it when we're sewing. Like I said, I am chain piecing, so I'll go back to my other color and get with this plain purple flower. I'm going to use this fun light brown print as the center. Oops. I almost had a big goof. My green background is a batik, so that doesn't matter right or wrong. The black fabric doesn't really have a noticeable right side, wrong side. I almost had this face up since I was showing you the fabric. Almost sewed it that way. That would not have been good. Although, as Bonnie Hunter has said, you paid for both sides of the fabric. You can use whichever one you want in your quilt. But I think I like the right side of that fabric to show. Okay, so I will, since Nan reminded me to use my thread cutter, angle that down so you can see how that works. So I've got my chain and I just separate the blocks so all I see is the thread and I just pop it right over that blade. Inside the plastic piece, I have put one of my used rotary cutter blades, and that's what we're using to snip. So kind of like a sharp knife there to trim our threads. But I do have to go back to my scissors because I've sewn my 3 corners and now I need to cut away that excess fabric. And I am one of those people that likes to save cut off triangles, bonus triangles. These were all cut from square and a square blocks that I did for another quilt. So I can make all sorts of fun blocks with those half square triangles. But a bonus triangle cut off a 1.5 inch square would be about 1 inch or 3/4, and that's way too small for me. I'm not that crazy. So I will be cutting these and just throwing them away And I can eyeball a 1/4 inch pretty well, so I'm not bothering to measure or use a rotary cutter to get that seam allowance. Like I said, I've been quilting for almost 20 years now, so I can eyeball that 1/4 inch seam. Nan is asking about the scant, the small 1/4 inch seam. I am not really worried about that. We'll see how my block turns out, but um, if you want to, here it'll show up better on the black fabric. If you want to aim just off the corner of your square and to give you that little bit of extra fabric that you can trim away, you can do that. You know, just a thread or two off the corner towards the corner, the outside edge of the block, will help you, give you a little more wiggle room when you're trimming up the final block. So that's a good point. Okay, so we have all our units, and I am going to finger press those seams so that we have our corners. And if you wanted to double check your units, remember this unit right now is 3.5 by 5. And we're just going to put that dark fabric in the center. So the two dark corners should meet when you lay your block out. I'll show that in just a second. So we're going to get our two halves together. Like I said, hard to do this in space. Get those dark centers together, and then at the top, one of your green corners touches a plain edge of that other side. So you're going to put a skinny, the green on the top, sewed to the block with the green on the sides, and keep your dark center fabric or white, you know, whatever center color you used. Hopefully it's different than your background. And then we'll just sew 2 of these pairs, and then we'll be able to put the top half and the bottom half together to make our flower. So when I lay these together, I am going to match up the diagonal seam for those centers. And if you want to put a pin on that diagonal line to keep those lined up, you can. I'm not going to worry about that too much this morning. Perfection is overrated. And same thing here. I mean, obviously, I'm going to try and hold on to those fabrics and keep that seam lined up for those centers, but flowers get kind of wonky sometimes. They're you know, the edges are never perfectly symmetrical a lot of times out in nature, so we don't have to be perfect either. And then I said with my chain piecing, and I've got multiple blocks going, so I can grab my next set of petals and trim those excess corners. We don't want all that bulk in our block. In the bucket. Can you take some of my... No, go ahead. Okay. Sorry for the whispering. My daughter had a question, so a little bit of off-camera family discussion going on there. Okay, so I've got my second block, and we're just going to finger press those. And I know I mention this every live stream. It gets really hot in this room, so I don't like having the iron going, and plus with the cord to the camera and everything, I don't like to get up and down. So I finger press my blocks when I am sewing on camera, and then I will go and press with an iron. So if at this stage you want to get up and press your blocks again, and I sew from stash, and I just grabbed this fabric and didn't take the time to press it before I cut. So that's probably a no-no. If you want to report me to the quilting police, I will happily pay my fine and continue to do it my way. So if you have any questions about sewing our stitch and flip corners with our blocks, we sewed from corner to corner and then trimmed away the excess. And we're going to match up our centers and sew two halves, two of the same. Oh, Heike is saying that she has two Great Pyrenees. What fun animals. Big, are they active dogs, or are they pretty mellow too? I mean, obviously dogs need daily exercise, but I just think that would be a fun friend in the house. But I can understand when my cat is shedding her winter coat too, I think, because she jumped up on my lap and just immediately, it was like one of those cartoons where all the hair just falls off, and I was covered in cat hair when she jumped off my lap. Heike, yes, I started the block of the month in January. Let me grab the link for you. You can certainly catch up at any time. All the blocks are on my website, and I'm going to give you the link. You can go back and download all the block patterns for this block of the month. And we'd be happy to have you join in at any time. I am also, since I have time on these live Saturday shows, I make multiple blocks and I am putting additional patterns out besides the one sampler pattern for the whole quilt. I'm doing patterns based on each block. So I need to, that way I have a plan for all these flower blocks that I'm making today, as well as one for the final block of the month layout in December. So we're on month 5. But if you're just doing one of each month, then it won't take you very long to get caught up. So again, I'm matching my centers. Whoops, I didn't sew this one. I had them matched up, and then I needed to answer Heike's question. And get our second half going. Okay, back to our polka dot block. We've got our 2 halves together. You can see how the difference with the corners at the top on one half and on the side on the other half. I am going to press this center seam open. Just cuts down on the bulk, and since there's not really a dark or a light half there, we'll just press it open. And that is obviously one of the great quilting debates. If you press your seams open, some people feel it weakens the, weakens the quilt top, since you just have that exposed thread, supposedly. You can turn your stitch length down a bit to make that seam a little bit stronger. I haven't ever noticed a problem. Even if I'm trying to quilt in the ditch, I haven't had any quilts fall apart yet. So, well, Heike, thank you for watching some of my other videos. Hopefully you find some useful, entertaining content there from years past. Obviously, quilt tutorials are going to stand the test of time. It's not like I'm talking about current events that will be out of date. Okay, so when I get to the last seam and I need to match those centers, this is a place where I will grab a pin and pin my blocks together, and finding that seam on black fabric can be a little bit of a challenge. But that's really the only place we have to match, because those corners are matching up to plain fabric. So that is nice. I get aware of what I'm doing as I sew when I'm on camera, and especially because I've been teaching a beginner class the last couple weeks. So as I feed this through, I'm going to be sewing slowly so that I can make sure that that flap doesn't get turned the wrong way as I feed it under the needle. So you'll see me kind of stop and start as I go, just to make sure that seam stays flat. Have to make sure that center seam goes the way it's going, and take the pin out. Looks like we are good to go on that. So we'll have 2 more flowers here pretty quick, because I've got my my other colorway going. It just takes a minute to finger press those seams open. Trying not to tug on your fabric too much and distort your squares, but have a good press and then match it up. I always find it a little bit trickier to get my seams perfectly lined up when I have pressed open, because that it doesn't, it doesn't have a groove to sit in. But sometimes, it's not going to be that noticeable if you're a couple threads off. Oh, Heike, very good sustainable quilting idea of finding your fabric from the thrift store and working from scraps. Yes, I've been sewing from my scrap bins for years, and it doesn't seem to go down. Of course, I have had an influx of fabric. I went on a shop hop last fall and tried to contain my purchases, but I definitely added to the stash there. And then the new Tula Pink line came out, and so I have the quilt shop holding some fabric. But I do have I'm debating between two different patterns, so I may that may be my next project, is a Tula Pink quilt. Oh dear. I almost had a disaster because my fabric was folded underneath itself. That would not have been fun to do that. Okay, so we have our first flower all done. Kind of a what is that? I'm saying lazy Susan, but that's the daisy with the yellow petals and the dark center. So that's fun. So there is our first flower. Here's our first block, and our next block, like I said, that has yellow flower. This is a really pale pink put inside those brown circles. So I love it. Okay, and I have plenty more fabrics and flowers cut out. So I'm going to start my chain piecing exercise and get some more blocks done here. Our tall flowers for the little bit different block of the month. This is when I wish that we were on Zoom so that we could have show and tell with all of you as well. I feel kind of lonely. So I do appreciate everybody's comments to keep the conversation going, so I'm not just babbling to myself here. Heike, thank you. Black-eyed Susan was the flower I was trying to think. Lazy Susan, black-eyed peas. If you do want to get on a Zoom chat with me, I'm hosting a modern quilting discussion on Monday night. So if you're free on Monday night, hop over to truebluequilts.com and get the registration link for that workshop that's going to be on Zoom. So you'd actually get to hop on and have more of an interactive discussion there. something new I'm trying this year with those Zoom calls. And it's really funny being on camera with my quilting friends because I work remotely for my day job and we never turn cameras on our meetings. So okay, I don't want to get too far ahead. Luckily, I have different different color centers on all these next blocks. So yes, thank you, Heike, for talking back to me. Nan, the Monday session is at 8 p.m. Eastern. So I'm on the West Coast, so it's 5 p.m. Pacific time, local for me, and then 8 p.m. Eastern, and I'll let you do the time zone conversion for Sweden based off 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you, Heike, for putting that in the chat for me. Do I have the, yeah, let me take a second and grab the link. Yeah, Nan, let us know if Heike is right with that 6-hour difference to Eastern time in the US. Yeah, go ahead and sign up, Nan. I understand you're not going to get up at 2 a.m., but I will send out a replay. So if you want to join in the discussion on the replay, I know that defeats the purpose of being on Zoom and being able to chat, but that's what we're doing for the Modern Quilting Workshop. Yeah, everybody was doing the time zone conversions to the UK today to catch the coronation, but I wasn't up in the middle of the night for that one this time around. So this afternoon I will be working on the pattern for the flower blocks. I need to finish doing my quilt math to get that pattern released. And I'll find a replay of the coronation. And there is my purple with the tan center. So this is going to be a fun, scrappy quilt. just chain piecing some different backgrounds. This is like a light purple check, almost plaid. And this fabric, as I'm waving my scissors around, is a fun batik with little hearts on it. That was I'm remembering which corner to put my center fabric in. Looking to see, I don't have a Sharpie up here, but the other thing I do when I was talking about sewing the diagonal seams on my tiny little squares, I don't mark the fabric. I take the line that was drawn on my bobbin cover, and I just take a Sharpie and I make a mark on the bed of my machine where that needle line is, and that way I can line up my fabric right on my machine bed, and I've got that line to make sure my corners stay on that line, and that way I can avoid some of the tedious prep of marking my fabric. So the Sharpie does wear off of your machine. If you were worried about that, let it dry. It won't harm your fabric at all. So you can do that if you don't have that 1/4 inch tape that you can put down on your machine as well. So I want to get started chain piecing. I'm going to run short of my green squares, so we will save that block for later. As I was cutting this morning, I cut green squares for the background in sets of 4, and I cut my center with this pink fabric. I'm going to have a white center, and I cut that in groups of 4, and I came over and was ready to sew and realized I need 2 stacks of green since there's 2 corners on the block. So here's our next group. I've got this really nice floral fabric. Isn't that kind of meta to make a floral block out of floral flat fabric? But it's got a pale pink background and these pretty green and blue flowers. So we will put that in our block next, or in our chain piecing lineup. And these blocks are going together a little bit faster than I thought. I may have to grab a different project to finish out our time. Heike, glad you and Nan are getting to know each other there. It's funny how you trim a square and then you put it down and it looks like it's a rectangle and not a square, so you have to double check. Crazy how your mind can play tricks on you. I got to travel to Germany when I was in college. I spent a few days there and walked all around Berlin. We visited the Heidelberg Castle. So gorgeous, gorgeous area. I'd love to go back. Okay, I'm going to put actually a white center on my purple plaid background. Got lots of pieces to snip with my little thread cutter. Oh. Okay, so I've got another one of my purple flowers ready to snip the corners and sew together. I'm catching up on the conversation in the chat. Heike was saying that she does not miss the big city living, and Nan also lives in a small village in Sweden. I would love to go to quilt shows in other countries. I'm just fascinated by um, the different styles, different feel of quilting. I know when I've seen quilts from the Tokyo quilt show, that a lot of the Japanese quilters are doing really intense uh, hand applique quilts, and so they have tons of tiny circles and leaves and everything, and just like I use the word intense because there's so many pieces. So, they'll have uh, queen or king size quilts that just have all sorts of tiny applique just covering the quilt. Um, and that's a very different style. I'm wondering what the trends are in Europe, if it's closer to kind of the modern American quilt style, um, what the different flavors are when you share quilts from other countries. Oh, Nan fixes vintage machines, mostly singers. Um, I need to contact some vintage sewing machine repair folks because my husband is very mechanically inclined, and he can fix most anything. He can figure that out. For a lot of years, he was a typewriter and printer repair technician. So I've told him ever since I started quilting that he needs to learn how to fix machines. And then when we retire and do that RV van life thing, we can just visit quilt shops, and I'll teach a quilting class and he can do some sewing machine repair from the van. I just think that would be a lot of fun to be on the road. Um, but we are also helping out his mother, who is almost 90, and her sewing machine stopped working. So, or not that it really stopped working, it's just gummy and sticky, and it needs a tune up. So he brought it home and was going to tinker around with it. It's a Ricker, Riccar. And I'm not familiar with that brand, and he hasn't found any videos specific to that machine yet. So I have some contacts that collect vintage machines. There's a lot of information on the singers because the featherweights are so popular, but some of these other brands aren't as well known. Um, oh, thank you for that recommendation, Heike. David Werther. I will definitely look at that. Um, and Nan is telling us that um, they don't do as much quilting. So, Nan, do a lot of Swedish quilters tie, or do you just do simple outline? Is that what you're saying with um, the quilting? Um, yeah, interesting. Heike, the one German quilter that I know of is Claudia Fiel, Pfiel. I'm not exactly sure on the spelling. I'd have to go back and look. But she has been quilting for a long time and won awards and things. So she does a lot of really colorful, interesting um, designs. But I don't necessarily think of her style as wildly different than most um, American quilts. So And Nan is saying that she's doing ruler quilting. Yes. Yeah. Fun, fun, fun. Yeah, I was, oh gosh, almost, it's hard, the passage of time. Uh, when you stop and think about it, I feel like it was just a few years ago we took a family vacation to Hungary, um, and it was 2014. So 10 years is not just a few years ago. But it was so fun to stop in a fabric store that, and of course this was in where my friend was living in a smaller town in the countryside. Not, we stayed for a few days in Budapest, and I did not go to a fabric store in the big city, but I did go to one in her small town. And this little shop off the main square, and it was just floor to ceiling, bolts on the floor in front of the shelves. It was overflowing. It was just all, and not just quilting fabric. This was all fabrics, upholstery fabrics, silks and rayons for clothing. And then of course she did have some 100% cotton that I got for quilting. But yeah, we had a fun chat trying to, uh, obviously I had not picked up any quilting terms in Hungarian, so it was a little bit difficult. But that is the fun aspect of traveling, and I so appreciate all the different European people that have learned English, because I benefit as the American that just thinks everybody should speak my language, and I don't at all. I um, try to be very respectful and appreciative when people will take the time to speak to me in English, because I have very limited language capabilities. So, to those of you who speak multiple languages, you are much better off than I am. Okay, so getting back to sewing on this one, I'm at that point where I'm lining up, eyeballing where those corner triangles will meet. That one's going to be a little bit off. I need to remember to change my presser foot. Did I leave it out here? I can just, we'll do a little demonstration here. I'll pop off. I have my 1/4-inch presser foot. So I'm trying to get that. It has that metal guide on the side for my fabric, but this particular one has this angle on the outside edge of the foot, and the fabric catches on that cutout. It's ridiculous. I need to find a different 1/4-inch foot for this machine, because I don't, especially when I'm sewing with diagonal seams, and that cutout will catch the fabric and flip it back the wrong way. So that's little annoyances of the modern world. Thank you to those of you that are finding my website for the block of the month and for the modern quilting discussion that's happening on Monday night. I dropped the links in the chat earlier. They're also in the video description below if you want to download the pattern for our tall flowers block. That is on the website truebluequilts.com. And I am hosting a lecture on Monday night. I will be talking about modern quilting and samplers. So if you're wondering how to make a modern quilt out of all these crazy blocks that we've been sewing for the block of the month, you'll want to join in. I do ask for pre-registration, and as in Nan's case, she's going to be sleeping in the middle of the night when the Zoom call happens, but I can certainly send you the replay if you are registered for that workshop. And I want to thank everyone that has been tuning in with me this morning. I so enjoy just being able to sit and sew and have some company here. On the first Saturday of every month is our live sew and chat, and I've been trying to keep it scheduled in the morning here in the US. I don't know what my summer schedule will turn out to be, but yes, getting up early and sewing before the heat of the day kicks in here in our summertime is a bonus. Nan's been quilting about 8 years and still learning. Of course, I've been quilting almost 20 years and still learning. You learn something from every time you take a class, every time you're with another quilter, you learn something, that's for sure. So I need to trim off my corners. Now that I'm chain piecing, I've got blocks in a couple different stages, so keep going with that. And I could have sworn I cut the right. Oh no, I didn't. I'm retracing my steps from when I was prepping all my blocks, and I'm sitting here looking at my last block that doesn't have enough green. And I remember thinking that, okay, if I cut the 2 strips and have, how many layers and how many cuts do I have to make? And I remember cutting 4 when I actually had 5 blocks. So that's where I went wrong. And so we piece our little squares on our flower petal rectangle, and then I'm just eyeballing that 1/4 inch and trimming away the excess fabric. If you want to measure and use a rotary cutter to do this trimming, the add a 1/4 ruler is a good tool to have in your sewing room. I started using the add a 1/4 for paper piecing, but I find it very handy for half square triangles and stitch and flip corners. So very useful tool is the add a 1/4 ruler. It has this 1/4 inch lip that you can just line up on your seams and use the rotary cutter. So that's very handy. And then finger press. So we have our two different units. I've got my tall, skinny unit with the green at the top, and then I've got my side unit with the green on the sides so that we can put those together and have our flower petals spin around the center there. That presser foot is still irritating me. So I suppose I could sew the other direction, but then I've got the flap on the bottom to worry about. So just kind of pick your poison. I could also use a stiletto, and that would help with the problem I was describing about the presser foot catching my fabric. I haven't ever gotten the hang of being coordinated enough to hold things with a stiletto. So I have to be very careful to keep my fingers out of the way. But yes, that fabric is laying much nicer when I turn that block around. So save that, and I'll do my second green on this other pink fabric. Whoops. See, it kind of just shoves up under my guide and doesn't sew, so I have to lift the presser foot each time. Oh dear. Poo. So learn from my mistake. I was chain piecing. I started with all the other fabrics I've used. I did the two green squares first, which makes sense because the placement of those makes a difference. On this fabric, I started with my dark center and I sewed all four of the green corners just on the same side as that center, which works for half of your block. Half of the blocks have the green lined up with the center. The other half, the center is lined up with a plain square. So I will be ripping out corners on that one. You didn't think I could get away for sewing for 2 hours without making a mistake? That would be just crazy. You will never be a good enough quilter to not need a seam ripper. That's my belief. We all make mistakes. Luckily, fabric, thread, you can easily start over. And if you don't want to rip out, just grab a different piece of fabric. And there is my kitty. She wanted to come say hi. You gonna get up on my lap? Come on. Just checking things out down here. Come on. And then she's running away. She's not going to jump up here so I can show her off. But she's a tuxedo, so she's mostly black. She's got one little spot of white on her face and then a white bib and white paws. but she's one of the cuddliest cats. I've had maybe half a dozen cats over my adult life, and she is the one that has bonded the most with me and likes to cuddle with me. She'll jump up on my lap. She doesn't like to sit on my husband's lap very much, but and I do keep the door to my sewing room closed, especially when I'm not in here. Obviously, the door stays closed because I don't want the cats to, find a corner and sleep on all my fabric and really get cat hair over everything. Once the quilt is done, then I don't mind, but I'd rather not have cats in here. And so they tend to stay away. Like I said, she's wandering in here and finding a place to nap over on the ironing board, which is fine for now. She'll wander off here pretty soon. But yeah, the cats just they don't come in here very much. Oh, I got that one on the first try. Pinned my center seam. And my husband is ready for a dog. He had a dog when we got married, and she died about a year later. He had her for her whole life. But he's ready for another dog because he'd like to be outside hiking and camping, and a dog would be a good companion for those outdoor activities. So one of these days, we just don't want to stress out our older cats with bringing in a new animal. They've never been around dogs. I need to fill in this area of the wall as a design wall, and then I could put my blocks up there. Summer project, maybe before next month's live stream, I will get that done. That will be a good backdrop. Why has it taken me so long? I've had this arrangement of my sewing room for a while. And my design wall is opposite from where I sit. So I can look at things on the design wall there, but it would be nice to have something where I could just grab it close to the machine. Putting together the plaid block. The fun of this block is you really do only have that one center seam to pin at the very end. I slow down in the middle there to get over the pin. And sewing. So here's the other bright purple with that fun batik fabric that needs a good pressing, and the dark purple grunge, and then the yellow flower that I did at the beginning, the Black-Eyed Susan at the beginning of the show. That was the first one I finished. So we've got 3 done. And what did I say I'm doing? Okay, the white goes. I am checking my placement here so that when I sew these blocks, I will get the white fabric in the right place. So I have my fabric laid down like this. I have one green corner, one plain corner, and so the plain corner. So I know I can put my white centers there on these next 2 pieces and get them lined up in the right place. And then I have my date with Jack here on those other blocks. Ta-da! Here is our purple plaid block. Very nice and soft, calm colors here. And you can see the difference there with your darker fabrics. Heike, yes, you'll love having a design wall. I have a little portable one that I can use for block demos if I'm on a Zoom call, or if I am at, in a classroom where I could just have a small portable one. My mom has a sewing room in her house, and she actually did the felt covered foam board and screwed that into the wall. So she's got a nice big plush design wall. I did the cheap and easy option, and I just took a small-ish piece of batting and just thumbtacked it, and it's been up there for 10 years. So yeah, I mean, eventually I could take it down and use it in a quilt and put a fresh piece of batting up there. But that's my cheap and easy option for a design wall, is to just use thumbtacks, which gave me an idea. I'll have to do a video about that this summer and share that on the channel. So yeah, whatever works. Quilters are all about finding, just get her done, finding the easy way to accomplish things. Okay, I'm back to my, let's see, what did I say? Okay, so that one, no, I've already done those 2. So I need this screen needs to be. And when I use my seam ripper, I try to remember to keep the blade flat, and then I rotate it up as I go under the stitch to make the, because sometimes if you try to hold your seam ripper straight up and get under the stitches, it can be hard to get that point under the stitch. So if you hold the blade flat and then turn it to get the sharpest part of the curve under your stitch, and every 3 to 4 threads there to pull out. Just in case there are some real beginners who have never used a seam ripper before, I thought I would explain the process as I take these green squares off because I sewed them in the wrong place. And if you look at, you may have to scroll back a ways on my shorts video page. When I have, like if I've sewn a border on incorrectly, you might think that would never happen, but it does. Or if I've sewn 2 blocks wrong and I've got a longer seam, I can actually use a seam ripper to, kind of like the idea of using a shaver, a razor, electric razor, to get under and get those seams apart. Okay, so now I can sew these fabrics in the correct place on my block to make the flower. And I didn't have the final green square to sew on this, but this is actually kind of a bright pink fabric, just a mottled, almost like Moda marbles or Stonehenge fabric, some of that just mottled, marbly looking fabric. That's a good blender. So I will save those squares for another time and do my my other square here. And then I will have to go count how many more flower blocks I need, because I've been, as I said, I've been designing a whole quilt around each of the block of the month, plus a sampler layout for the very end of the year. And my monthly quilts have 12 blocks, so that you could use them as the sampler layout at the end, but I've been showing them with just one block. So I'll need 12 blocks, and I've got 6 in the works here. I made 2 or 3 last weekend, so pretty close to being able to put that quilt top together. Like I said, I have the sketch for the flower quilt that I'm calling Flower Market, but I don't have all the math done. So I'll work on that, getting that finished up this weekend. Thanks, Nan. Have a good night. Thanks for joining in. I will see you very soon. Okay, so now I've done my repair job and I have my no. No, my repair job wasn't done. I got my uh, corners in the right place, but there's no way to match those up. I did them on the wrong side. So now I have to take the black square off too. Silly, silly. Uh, that's what happens when you get in a rush and you don't double check your layout. Uh, People are always interested when I turn away. My little thread catcher trash bucket is this cute little um, caddy, a little tote. It has it's almost a vinyl canvas, waterproof material, not oilcloth, but just the edges are canvas, and this is kind of a plasticky fabric. And there's cute little pockets, so I keep my sewing machine tools there, and I put my wonder clips on the edge. That just sits by my machine, and it's the um, thread catcher. I like sewing these squares so much, I'm going to do it twice. So that's how you can console yourself if you make a mistake. You just get to do more of what you love. Right? But easy fix. Get that center square sewn in the correct corner of the block. And then we'll be able to put our flowers together. As I'm finger pressing those open, I figured I would show you the seams. I press the corners to the corner fabric, and then I press the center seams open. So this final center seam I'll probably press open just so that the very center of the block lays nice and flat. Just because there isn't really a dark side to the petals once we get to this stage, and are sewing them together. It just seems to work out better to have them flat. I mean, aren't those little bonus triangles so cute? I was just thinking, what could you do with your bonus triangles? Well, I Laura Wazlowski. Uh, I'm messing up her last name, but I took or I didn't take a class from her, but she was a teacher at a retreat that I went on years ago, and she does kind of improv fusible applique. So she would keep a sheet of fusible interfacing, and she would just arrange her fabrics, raw edge fabrics on her fusible, and then you can press it all down. Um, so that would be a way if you didn't want to get rid of these little bits. Obviously, those would be great little fillers for something. If you were making, I don't know, it would take quite a bit of filler to get a pin cushion, and you typically want to use walnut shells type of stuff in pin cushions to help sharpen your blades or your pins and keep them sharp in your pin cushion. I have heard of people putting scraps like this into a pillowcase, and when the pillowcase is full, they sew it shut and it becomes a dog bed that they can donate to the Humane Society. But then in response to that idea, I heard that it gets too lumpy. It's hard to wash, and the Humane Society wants to, or the animal shelter wants to wash those kind of pet beds. So maybe scraps like this aren't that useful for dog beds filler. So I don't know. Unfortunately, mine are going to the landfill. I suppose you could chop them up. I'm thinking of shredders for paper that we've gotten. We found ways to use up those shreds as fill for other things. So I'm interested in hearing what people do with tiny scraps. There is a big movement right now for sustainable quilting. So as Heike was saying, she finds her fabric at thrift stores. You can cut down old shirts and use those as quilts. Obviously, that's a huge tradition in quilting, is to use discarded clothing, repurpose that. But those tiny scraps and trimmings from our quilt blocks, what's the best sustainable option for those? I'd be interested. I'll have to do some research. I know there's some folks talking about that these days, so I'll have to go listen to what they have to say on sustainable quilting. So I guess the question would be, what's the most eco-friendly way to dispose of fabric scraps? Because there's always going to be some piece that you can't use in your quilt that you have to trim off. So, okay, I am back to my leftover stack of half square triangles. And here's an interesting blue, darker side and the lighter side. But even that lighter side is really a pretty mottled blue. So that is definitely fits the reversible category for me. And this fun blue that had kind of like daffodil, not daffodil, dandelion puff balls. That's what that looks like to me. Fireworks or starbursts or puff balls. There is fun. So like I said, I was making square in a square units, and I had all these leftover triangles, but they are a decent size. So I am just sewing them to use in some other project someday. Since I don't have a plan for these blocks, well, I do have something in mind, but I don't know if I have. Oh, that would work. There's another kind, almost like a leopard cheetah print. Cheetah, not cheater, cheetah animal print there. That was cool. I don't have another. I'm trying to match my fabrics because I need pairs, and I have one oddball fabric. So I've got this navy that's almost got a real tone-on-tone floral leaf pattern, and I need to trim off these dog ears. Let's see. And these are the size square I need for the block I have in mind. So we will go to town with those. Okay, quilting trivia time. This little tip. Is there any other name for that besides dog ears? So it's kind of, if you look at it like that, you've got the little dangly bits. So trimming off the dog ears. I don't think, I've never heard another name for that. So let me know if you have. Yes, you could. Heike is saying you could sew, especially on something like this. You could sew that extra 1/4 inch, and then you already have your half square triangle sewn. I just don't like taking that extra step. I'd rather just trim the pairs and then sew them at a later time. That works out for my leader ender project because I'm usually focused on getting the block done rather than taking the time to sew the bonus triangle right then. I'll just save it for another time. But yes, if you plan ahead, you can get all your bonus triangles sewn ahead of time. Let's see if I have the fabric I had in mind. No, that was too dark. I want the lighter blue of that fabric next. So we'll put that in a pile for later. And I'll remember to use my thread cutter this time. As I'm throwing stuff on the floor, you can see all my gray hairs. Still have one flower to put together in between all these half square triangles. And we're going to be right about on time. I've chattered away for long enough. These live streams go for about 2 hours. I really can't ignore my family for the entire day. So, I do occasionally, I'll leave the house for a sewing day on a Saturday. So it's kind of like ignoring them the whole day. But when I am when the family is home, I hate to lock myself in the sewing room for more than a couple hours. So that's why our sew and chat is only about 2 hours on the first Saturday of every month. So I will get this last flower block for today. Sewn together. Ta-da! Fun peachy pink light background with those green and blue flowers on it makes, as you get further away, it just makes a fun little polka dot effect on the on our tall flower block for the little bit different block of the month. This is our May block. We're making tall flowers with stitch and flip corners. And I was just reading Heike's comment. She doesn't like sewing triangles together. So she takes the extra step when it's still at this stage. So if you've got a unit that you're going to end up cutting off a triangle, take this back to the machine and sew. Do you sew a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch away from your previous seam? On this tiny thing, you'd only have room to sew a 1/4 inch away. And then when you trim, you end up with 1/8 inch seams. So you have to be careful of that. Otherwise, sew a 1/2 inch away from your seam, and then you can sew or cut and still maintain your 1/4 inch seam. 1/4 inch from the original, 1/4 inch from the new one makes 1/2 inch. But yeah, we'd end up with really tiny little triangles there if I did that. So I've got one more block almost done. I just need to cut some more green. And Heike would do the scant 1/2 inch seam to get her bonus triangles done. And Heike, you came into the block of the month late. January's block was just simple 1/2 square triangles. So that's what I'm using these bonus triangles for, to make a quick triangle block for my little bit different sampler. Because as I said, I've been sewing all of my blocks each month into their own quilt. So if I'm not careful, I'll end up in December and have a bunch of quilts, but no extra blocks to help finish the folks that have joined this quilt along finish out their quilt. And I was very predictable. February's block was a heart. And then I did a churn dash in March and a star in April. So we're keeping to some of the classics, just changing them to be rectangle 6 by 9 inch blocks. Okay, so 4 half square triangles would be a square, so I need to do one more row so that it is a rectangle. Oh, my nose is getting itchy. Making sure my triangles are sitting the correct side up. And there you can see the Triangles Galore block from January. So again, a monochromatic set of triangles for January and our flower for May. So again, a little bit different block of the month is rectangle blocks. These finish at 6 inches by 9 inches, and it's only May. So you can catch up and see more rectangle blocks throughout the year at truebluequilts.com. I am going to sign off just a few minutes early. I want to thank every one of you for sitting and sewing and chatting with me today. Best wishes. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, a wonderful week ahead, and I will see you back here in June. Stay tuned. I will have more quilt tutorials debuting on my channel soon, but the live stream happens every first Saturday. So take care. Happy quilting to everyone, and thanks for being here with me today. I'll see you soon.